Welcome to Blackbriar Gaming. In preparation for the new edition of Horus Heresy, Warhammer Community are going legion by legion, teasing us with rule snippets from the upcoming release. Today, we'll be looking at the 14th Legion, the Death Guard. Just a quick note before we get into it, as we're a new channel, a subscribe and a like really helps us reach a bigger audience. So if you enjoyed the video, please hit those buttons down below. Alrighty, here we go. Death Guard. Popular, very popular legion for a whole bunch of reasons. You see quite a few of these around. The filthy aesthetic that they've got going is nice and unique for them, and I really enjoy it. So Death Guard, for lore reasons, they're all about being, honoring the battlefields they've fought upon and the marks on their armor, and seeing as a mark of honor and experience, and veteran level skills. So they leave themselves covered in muck, which is great, and they look great, and it means you can go absolutely to town with some amazing weathering with the Death Guard army. And weathering's just fun. It's fun to model. So fun from the lore piece, fun from the it looks cool piece, and then fun from the actually hobbying it piece as well. On top of this, they've got some great looking special units with their scythes, their special troops with their big two-handed scythes, copying their Primarch, of course, and scything down the enemy with those. Lots of fun. They've got this tendency on top of that for chemical and biological warfare, which you see in some of their units as well, and we've actually seen today with some of the rules. And that's a lot of fun. That's cool. Nothing more entertaining than watching your foe disintegrate from acid and disease in front of you. Mortarion itself, the Primarch, really cool figure. He's got this Grim Reaper kind of styling and this absolute disdain for the Emperor's psychic tendencies. But he puts up with them because he understands the bigger picture, but then he just gets sick of it and he turns against it. But then wonderfully, his fall and the tragedy of Mortarion is that he has to turn to this thing that he hates, the warp and psychic stuff, to save his legion. So lots of fun, great stories there. Where they get really interesting, the Death Guard for me, is late Heresy at the Siege of Terra, where they've fallen to the Plague Lord Nurgle, and they're starting to decay, and they're starting to get some weird stuff going on, and they're not quite 40k Death Guard with the ridiculousness of tentacles flying everywhere, but they've embraced this chaos god, and they're working out what that means. And there's some really cool stuff about that in Warhawk especially, which I read recently. The latest Siege of Terra novel starts to get into that and what's happening in the Legion and how they feel about it and what's going on. Really, really interesting stuff. So Death Guard, lots of fun, very popular, look cool, do some cool things. In particular, their rules that we've seen today are very interesting and very good. Maybe too good, in fact. Let's have a look at them. So the first rule here is Remorseless, which is a wonderful, sounds a lot like Relentless, and funnily enough, does the same kind of thing. But this is Remorseless. So it reads, a model with this special rule that does not have the cavalry unit type or artillery unit subtype ignores any modifiers or restrictions on moving during the movement phase, including modifiers imposed by terrain or restrictions from rules such as pinning, which would normally stop them from moving. As long as the model does not run or make use of another alternative form of movement, such as activating a jump pack, disembarking, or deploying via deep strike. Furthermore, as long as the model has not run or used another alternate form of movement in the controlling player's movement phase, it is counted as stationary when making shooting attacks. This is huge, until the start of the controlling player's next turn. This special rule does not affect whether or not a model may make a charge, and does not allow models with the vehicle unit type to ignore the effects of an immobilized result, which is very fair. But it does allow a model with the vehicle unit type to move even when under the effects of the crew stunned result on the vehicle damage table. Lots going on there. There's a lot of rules here, and they apply to a bunch of different units. So this rule, it's really good. So let me break it down very simply. It means you can move and fire heavy weapons with no penalty, which is just fantastic. There's a bunch of other things you can do with it. You can move while pinned. You don't have to worry about lowering your movement value when moving through terrain, so you're moving around the board faster and more flexibly and with more consistency. Great stuff going on here. It could be that this rule perhaps pushes armies towards a certain build to take advantage of it. There's been a lot of chat about how many heavy support squads you can jam into a Death Guard army because of it. This pseudo Relentless is it's so good. I'll get to that in a sec, but this rule is moving around. They say war games are won in the movement phase, and this rule really talks to that and really puts Death Guard up there for armies that can outplay an opponent for the objectives. Heavy support squads, right? So heavy support squads are not a overly popular choice for various reasons, but one of them being that they suffer from not being able to move and shoot. It's hard on a table that's packed full of terrain, which all tables should be, to actually get beads onto the enemy units that you want to be shooting at without moving first and with having no maneuverability. You're sitting at the back of the table. If you move, now you can't shoot, and you've got a 200, 300 point unit doing nothing for a turn, which you can't really afford. Death Guard units with heavy weapons can do whatever the hell they want because they've got Remorseless. So they can move into terrain, through terrain, no penalty, no issues, move around the board and still get shots off from their weapons at full ballistic skill and just have a great time. This is really nice too because there's some great heavy weapons that are shorter range as well, which always makes this unit a bit awkward, but slap on Death Guard units, they don't care, they're moving up the table and still shooting. Now, unless I'm reading this wrong, this is also a fantastic rule for vehicles with multiple weapons, which is most vehicles, who can now move around the flanks of the table without diminishing their firepower. So your vehicles, usually, if they move a certain distance, I won't go into the details, but if they move a certain distance, they start losing the ability to shoot their weapons, or they're snap shooting them, or etc. Ordnance in particular, if you move at a certain speed, you can't fire ordnance. Doesn't matter for this. If I'm reading this right, remember, vehicles with ordnance weapons, so Vindicators, perfect example, can move up to their full speed and still fire that ordnance weapon, which, as we see it right now, no other army can do in Heresy, and we know how powerful that is. Vindicators in particular actually kind of went down power level. They don't do the same thing, they're doing different things, but if all ordnance weapons I'm talking about here, right? So it'll be interesting to see how the rules are intended versus written, to see if that does apply to vehicles. I certainly assume it does. Please correct me in the comments if you disagree. But if it's allowing Death Guard vehicles to move at full distance and shoot all of their weapons, that is insane, especially because some of the distances we're seeing for tanks go up to 16 inches in the playtest rules. I'm talking about Sakarans here. So if Sakarans can move 16 inches and fire all of their weapons, that's amazing. Opponents are going to find it very, very hard to hide their units when you can move all over the table and still just unleash hell on your enemy. So love that. Love it for infantry. Love it for tanks. I've seen people throwing around the idea of this 60 Marine army all packed with autocannons cruising up the table, because likely we will see a Death Guard Rite of War, which will allow you to take heavy support squads as troops. Notably, playtest rules, they're non-compulsory troops, so you can't just take them. More notably, unless a rule is changed or something else comes out, I don't believe there's a way to give those heavy support squads the line subunit type or the line unit type. So yes, that'd be cool. A whole bunch of autocannons, great. But you've got to remember that line keyword, or whatever they're calling it, that goes with your infantry unit type is super important. A lot of troop choices have it, not all of them. Tactical support squads, for instance, I believe do not have that line in little brackets, but you need units with that line piece because they're the ones that are going to be capturing and denying objectives. And without them, you're probably not going to be winning games unless you table your opponent. But that's not how we want to play this game, right? That's no fun for everybody. So yes, it'd be really great to pack your army full of heavy support squads with autocannons and las cannons and all the goody bits, but I don't think that'll win you games, even if it'll look absolutely hilarious while you're doing it. So that is Remorseless. I think it's a fantastic rule. It's great for so many units in an army. We'll wait and see how that plays out, but I think it's going to make Death Guard very powerful. Moving on, let's talk about Alchem weapons. So that's the next part here that we've got for the Death Guard. We've got the Alchem pistol, Alchem flamer, heavy Alchem flamer, and the Alchem cannon that do all the things you would imagine when compared to their flamer equivalents. But the Alchem weapons they're a bit fun. So look, who doesn't love spraying your enemy with flesh-burning acid? Who doesn't enjoy that? It's great. It's a lot of fun. But is it game-changing, the rules that we're seeing here? No, not really. You could maybe see a tactical support, a heavy support squad kitted out with them just for funsies, I guess, just to get the lore and pack it into your army, follow the narrative. But And sure, there's going to be situations where you cause a lot of wounds with these weapons. Just to clarify, these are like a flamer, but they have Fleshbane. So Fleshbane means you're wounding on 2+, which is good, especially against infantry that happens to be a little bit tougher. But it comes with gets hot. Ugh, don't love that. So there will be situations where you dump a bunch of these guys out of a drop pod or a rhino, whatever that looks like, and you go absolutely to town on an enemy squad. Probably flamers is the way to go rather than the heavy flamers, because the extra strength pip doesn't really help that much because you're already wounding on 2+, and AP 5 versus 4 against Marines makes no difference whatsoever. So you go the cheaper option, the easier option, and you'd go the flamers and you'd chuck them in a rhino, you go smashing up the table. You don't care about terrain for your rhino because you're Death Guard, so you're driving through buildings and you pop out and you're absolutely ham with a bunch of Alchem flamers. Sure, you're going to cause a lot of wounds, but your opponent, assuming they're Marines, and most armies will be Marines, especially because we're not seeing any rules for non-Marines in the initial release of Heresy, they're going to get their save still. So look, whoop-de-doo, you've done a bunch of wounds, they're still getting their 3+ save. And the inherent weakness of template weapons remains. Just so anyone that hasn't used template weapons before, and I dare say there's very few that are watching this, but you get your tier-shaped template and you chuck it down, and it has to be touching each of your models with one of these flamers, and you can't really overlap yourself, and there's all kind of issues getting close enough to make sure you're covering the most amount of enemy models. Maybe they've spaced themselves out at that nice 2-inch mark or whatever it is in the new edition, so you're not covering that many anyway. I don't love template weapons for this reason. They're very good in some circumstances, and they're great if they have a lower AP, but I just don't think that's going to do this much. Certainly not game-changing, as I said before. And the real downside, the thing that really makes this a bit of a meh moment for me, is the gets hot piece. So it just seems unnecessary that they put gets hot on these weapons. Unlucky, cruel for the Death Guard player, because if you roll a 1 with a template weapon that has gets hot, you can't fire it, and you also take a wound. So that's just, it hurts on 2 levels there. So you're gonna, if you pack a squad of 10 and they all jump out, at least probably 1, maybe 2, and geez, it'd be terrible if it was more, are gonna roll some 1s, and now you're only shooting with 8 maybe of those flamers, and maybe those guys die, and that's unlucky. So as I said, bit of a meh. I think they could have left the gets hot off these weapons, and they still wouldn't have been considered broken. It's a shame that the GW went down that route, but they're a bit of fun. And look, if you're going the Death Guard route and you want to cram some more lore-appropriate weapons and squads into your army just for funsies, then these look like a great way to do it. And that brings us to the end of our Heresy chats for today. Thank you so much for watching. Overall, I think the Death Guard special rule is competing for the Imperial Fist on how impactful it will be on the table. Top tier, people. The Imperial Fist's better ballistic skill may let them kill a few more enemies, but I think the Death Guard's movement is going to win them games. Let me know what you think about the Death Guard rules in the comments. Make sure to keep rolling those dice and getting hyped for Heresy.